Hey guys, Clover here, and welcome back to the channel. Before I get into the theory, there's a few things I want to go over. First of all, thank you for all the support recently. We're almost at 700 subscribers, and I'm trying to get to 1,000 by the end of the summer holiday. So if you could subscribe, that would be amazing. Secondly, just want to say that this theory I came up with ages ago and just haven't got around to. But recently I saw that Shay actually tweeted something similar to this theory. I want to say this, I didn't steal it from Shay, but we just end up having similar ideas at similar times. And the final thing I want to say is that I released a pilot for my Delta Blight series, or ARG, a week ago now. And it's done pretty well, it's at 1,100 views. But not that many people, I think only 13, have actually found the second part of this start of the ARG. So I just want to send people back there and recommend people to have a sort of a hard look. Mainly because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that a lot of the theories haven't noticed about this so far. Also, I am not going to be making any form of Reddit for this, because I don't really have the time to go over that. But if you do want to make a Reddit, I do believe r/Delta Blight is currently available. Finally, before I get onto the theory, I just want to bring up the fact that after this theory comes out, I'm going to be going on holiday, meaning that episode 2 of Delta Blight will be a bit longer, and also the theory that's coming out next week will be pre-recorded. Meaning that if anything comes out after this theory comes out, it won't be in the next theory. Anyway, without further ado, into the theory. Okay, I've been trying to figure out how to start this video for a while, as every time I try to think of what point to start on, I realise that each point could work as a start, because this theory is very circular with the evidence. So I've decided I'm just going to start with the way I started thinking about this theory and the way I came up for it. But first, for a bit of context to this theory, in Deltarune, obviously there's a lot of music that happens in the Dark Worlds, whether that be through fights or just in the background of areas, and it's one of the most famous parts about Deltarune. Also, in Chapter 4, you play the piano to solve puzzles. Now, that's literally all the context you need for this theory. What I want to specifically talk about is when you have to play the big piano to solve the puzzle that Susie writes down, and where you let Kris play themselves. Well, that scene has obviously been talked about to death through theories. I think the bit after has been talked about less, which is where you are able to play a game on the piano, but yourself. And there's multiple different songs you can play, and depending on what you play, Rousey and Susie will react differently. First of all, if you just play Megalovania, this is the most famous one, Toby Fox will just run you over. Obviously a joke, and not a very important one to this theory, but when it gets interesting is the fact that if you play certain songs that appear in the game, like Rules Card Song, or the song that plays with Prophecy, or other songs like the Undyne's theme, you will get a different response from Susie and Rousey, relating back to where you hear them in game. For example, if they play Prophecy, Susie will mention the fact that it sounds like we're serenading Rousey. If we play Rules Card theme, Susie will comment on the fact that it sounds like the theme to us kicking if you play the Rules Card theme, Susie and Rousey will comment on the fact it's a theme from Rousey. God damn it. If you play Rules Card theme, then Susie and Rousey will comment on the fact that it's the song that plays during Rules battles. And also, if you play the Undyne theme, which can be heard within Garson's song, then Susie will comment on the fact that she thinks that Undyne would like this. Now, these are very interesting, as they do heavily imply the fact that in some way, the characters in the game can actually hear what songs are being played. This is interesting, as most games and shows use what's known as non-diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound is basically sound that only we can hear, and that's only meant to add value to us. But what this implies is the fact that all the music within Deltarune is actually diegetic sound, or at the very least all the music within the Dark Worlds. As some songs that you play that are from Light World don't really have reaction. What makes this interesting is the fact that when you then go to the second Dark World in Chapter 4, the music that plays in the background is very similar to that of the first Dark World, except for it's slightly off, like it's an imperfect replica of it, which makes sense as Susie's Dark World in most aspects is imperfect compared to the first one, and it's things that she remembers being in the Dark World, but she doesn't remember them perfectly, meaning they become twisted in some way. It means the music has been affected by her memory of it, meaning that she has to remember the music in order for the music to appear in the Dark World. Okay, next area I want to go with this, now that I've explained the whole premise behind this theory, is the fact that when you're in Chapter 3, obviously you have the music section, and in the music section you have to sing a song which Rousey changed the lyrics of. Reading this lyrics of the original song, it talks a lot about bats and like baseball and stuff like that, which is heavily connected to Des, who uses a wiffle bat and is connected to baseballs a lot throughout the chapters. And the fact that we know in Chapter 4, through Des's bedroom, that she had her own band and she would play music a lot, with her having a bunch of different instruments, it could imply the fact that if the songs from the Dark World, as I mentioned with Susie, are things that the parts who made the Dark World remember, and songs that they remember put into the background of the Dark World, it would then mean that the music that we sing in the rhythm sections are actually songs that someone who made the Dark World should have heard and remembered. Kris made Chapter 3's Dark World, but that would make sense, as it would make sense for Kris to have listened to Des's music due to the fact they seem to have some kind of history with the band posters, as they mention when you look at them, the fact that some of these may have never happened, meaning that they may have seen some of them, but they know which ones didn't happen. The fact that a song created by Des is now in the Dark World, in the background of it, is very interesting, especially as it is very important, as it's a rhythm game you have to do yourself, rather than most of the time where it's just in the background to add stuff to the scene. This time, the music is the scene. The reason I bring this all up is the fact that it shows obviously that the music that plays has to have some meaningful connection to the past who made the Dark World. Obviously this Dark World is very heavily based on the Dreamer family splitting up, which was caused by Des's disappearance. So if the thing that caused the family to split up was Des's disappearance, the chapter based around the family splitting up, it would make sense for a song in that to be from Des and be about Des, as Kris, if they made the Dark Fountain in such a way where their will reflected their want for their family to get together, obviously they would remember Des a lot more, making her own song appear within the Dark World. Now, what I'm trying to get at by all of this, and what I'm trying to lead this to, is the idea that I think all of the songs we hear throughout Deltarune are created by either Des, Azriel, or Kris. We know that Des and Kris are both quite good at music, with Kris playing piano and Des having a band, and we can assume that Azriel would also have been good at music, as to have a band you need more than one member, and Azriel and Des have seemed to be quite close from what we know. Also, obviously Noelle can sing quite well, so all four of them do seem to have a lot of musical history, so it would make sense for them to have made a lot of songs, and for those songs to then end up in the background of each Dark World. It's also important to note that we can actually properly figure out the fact that most songs would have been made by Des. We know for a fact that Chapter 4's Dark World was made by Des or the Knight. At this point, I think it's more likely that Des is Knight, especially with this music theory in mind, as if the music was created by Des and Kris, then someone who need to be really familiar with that music had to make the Dark Fountains, which would most likely be Des or Kris, which is what we see in Chapter 3 and 4. But in Chapter 2, We can also figure out that Des is the person to make a dark fountain there, as in chapter 4, there is a closet that says a large man could fit in here, and you refuse to open the door. That implies the fact that Kris knows the knight's in there. This is not the first time we've seen this line of dialogue though, as in chapter 2, if you try to open the door in the computer lab, it will say the same thing, implying the fact that that's also the place where the knight was staying. Meaning that we know for a fact that chapter 2's fountain was made by the knight, or by Des. To stretch this out a little bit more, this is a bit of a bigger stretch. We know that both times it's described as a doorway to a closet. And the only other closet we know about is obviously the main dark fountain's closet. Which is interesting, because the first dark world we go to that isn't that one, which has like, you know, the feels and happen dreams, that classroom is said to have a door that leads from the classroom to the closet, meaning that every single time the knight makes a dark fountain, it's in a room that has a door leading to a closet for the knight to hide in. Obviously that last one's a bit more of a stretch, but I still think it's interesting to point out. Well, it's very interesting to figure out the fact that all the music we hear, number one, can be heard by the characters in-game, and number two, were created by either Kris or Des, or maybe Adriel and Noel. But what I think is even more interesting is by using this theory, we can figure out certain songs that haven't appeared yet that will appear in chapter 5. The reason I think this is because when you are in Noel's house and you're walking around the soul, if you go over to Kris and then have Kris lock you back up again, once you go back to Kris, the vent will be sealed, but if you wait for long enough, then Kris will start playing on the piano. This is just even more evidence towards the idea that the music we hear was created by Kris and Des, due to the fact they play multiple songs, like Rules Card and The Prophecy, on the piano. There is one song that Kris plays that's interesting. This song is called 7-4, and it's a song that we don't hear anywhere else in the game, unlike the rest of the songs, which are just remixes of songs we've already heard before. The reason I find this interesting is because I think this means that 7-4 is a hint towards a song that's going to be playing in chapter 5. This would make sense as chapter 4 has a lot of hints towards what happens in chapter 5, due to the fact that chapter 4 was supposed to come out with chapter 5. Now, originally that's where this series was going to end, because I was like, there isn't much more I can say about this. But after a little bit of thought while listening to it, I noticed that Kris plays the piano quite naturally, because it's actually a recording of Toby Fox himself playing. But interestingly, a couple of times you will notice that one or two notes get misplayed, which first of all just adds to the naturalism of the scene. And I've seen a few explanations of it either just being there to make it seem more natural, or that it is to do with the fact that Toby Fox said he injured his wrist a while back. But based on the fact that when I was listening to it, it felt like it was always the same notes in each song that was getting missed, on the same notes but the same like area of notes, meaning that it was the same hand. And also, there's another song that I purposely left out called The Last Prophecy, which is a remix of the Prophecy song we usually hear, but made in a lower octave, meaning it sounds almost sadder. Also, we don't get to learn about The Last Prophecy until the end of chapter 4, so this is obviously foreshadowing for that. And the fact that one of the hands is mispressing the notes, and we get The Last Prophecy as the final song, could imply that it's foreshadowing, or more foreshadowing, to the fact that Kris might lose their hand. And that's something we have a lot of hints about through Kris' hand being invisible when using the shadow crystals, something falling through Kris's hands, the dart being stuck into Kris's hands, and now this. It could imply the fact that the Last Prophecy, or whatever has to happen for the Last Prophecy, will cause Kris to lose one of their hands. But that is just this theory. I hope you enjoyed.